make him an offer he can't refuse.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Stuff that dreams are made of.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
One morning, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Go ahead. Make my day.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Hello and welcome to Front Row Classics, a production of the Front Row network of shows, where we take a look at some of the greatest films ever made. And here's your host, Brandon Davis.
Well, hello to everybody out there in podcast land. This is Front Row Classics with NPR Illinois Community Voices. I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and joining me once again is my co-host, Eric Flick. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Brandon, how are you?
Not bad. You know, this is our 100th episode of Front Row Classics. We made it. We made it. Craig can stop rubbing it in our faces that we haven't made it to the 3 digits.
You better.
Yeah. So this is pretty cool. I mean, I started this podcast in 2015. It was just me and Jeremy sitting talking about Singing in the Rain, and had many different co-hosts over the years, and then finally had some stability when you joined in September of 2019. And so it's been great. And just to think of all that we've covered.
Yeah, indeed. And all the people now that we've had the opportunities to talk to. I mean, the last couple of years have been great for that.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode is no exception. This is actually a very special discussion, because we wanted to do a special movie for our 100th episode, and you don't get much more special than To Kill a Mockingbird from 1962. And we're talking to somebody who was there. We talked to a lot of people who are adjacent to a lot of people that we talk about, but we're talking to a lady who not only was there, but was a huge part of it. We're talking to Mary Badham, who played Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's just a pleasure getting to speak to her.
I'd point out too, Academy Award nominee,
yes,
Mary Badham, for this role, in certainly a classic among classics. It's a great movie based on the great book.
You know, it's a movie that I've seen multiple times, certainly in school, but just for pleasure. It's one of my favorite, pieces of literature as well. And it amazes me, no matter how much I think I know it, it still is one of those movies that can get you emotionally every time.
Yeah, indeed. I did a rewatch of it, and there were parts that really sit with me different today too, and I'm sure we'll come back and talk more about the film a little bit after we have a chance to introduce Mary to everyone.
Yes, and Mary's delightful. She's very enthusiastic. She considers this kind of her mission to keep this movie alive. She's the biggest known ambassador for this movie on the planet, and she's enthusiastic, and she loves using this. She travels around the country normally, when we're not, under the blanket of COVID. She travels around all the time talking to school kids and to different groups about this movie and about the lessons you can learn. And so she's a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of just philosophy when it comes to the lessons this movie can teach.
Yeah, and she gives us her take on it, and what it means to her, and what she hopes other people take from it as well.
Yeah, so we'll talk more once the interview here is over about the movie itself and more of our opinions on it. But let's get into our conversation with Mary. And it is an absolute pleasure to welcome to Front Row Classics Mary Badham. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
Thank you so much for, just wonderful. How have you been?
Great. Thank God. Well,
Good.
Not having to go anywhere, just to be home for a change is great.
I'm sure you're used to traveling around, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here to talk to us. This is the 60th anniversary of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I got to tell. I got to tell you, it's one of the tentpole movies in my life. So this is an absolute pleasure to be able to sit here and talk to you. And first of all, does it feel like 60 years?
No, it's like I don't know where the time went. It's really weird.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, can you take us back first of all to just how you got the role of Scout in Mockingbird and what the audition process was like?
Well, it's kind of started for months before that. Bodie Boatwright, who was a talent scout, had been searching high and low throughout the South to find these children for the film and was having zero luck. And she got really tired of it and asked to go home to New York. She's like, I'm done. I'm tired. I want to go home. And they were like, please just do Birmingham, Alabama. We've got, a group of kids lined up there, and just try that. If you don't find them there, then, we'll let you go home for a while. Okay. So she comes to Birmingham. Now, my mother had been the leading lady at the Town and Gown Theater, our local theater, for a number of years. And the man who managed the theater, who ran the theater, James Hatcher, asked my mother to bring me in so that I could try out for the role of Scout. And Mom says, well, she's never done anything. She doesn't know anything. And he goes, I'll just bring her in anyway. And she goes, well, I'll have to ask my husband, Henry. So my mom goes to my dad and asks permission, and he naturally said no. And she goes, now, Henry, what are the chances the child will get the part anyway? Oh, well. So then there was the big fight of making it actually happen. And Bodie Boatwright, who was a very wonderful, sweet lady, and the producer, Alan Pakula, who was an absolute total gentleman, he promised to take very good care of me and that Mother could be there and all of that. And finally, Daddy agreed. And so we went to New York for a screen test. Well, before that, we had gone to the theater. They had all the kids come in, and some children did like monologues. They had things prepared. I didn't know anything. So my girlfriend and I just got up on stage and we made something up according to what was set up on the set, which they loved because that's what they were looking for. They wanted children that had real imaginations and that could go with the flow. And so went from there to New York for the screen test. And evidently that went swimmingly. So then it was back home to pack and get ready and go to Los Angeles. So
what did your father do?
My father was president and chairman of the board of Bessemer Coal Island Land Company. He was also a general in the Air Force. He was brigadier general. He had been started off in the cavalry, ended up in World War I, World War II, Korea. Was an advisor on Vietnam. I remember senators and congressmen coming to the house to talk to my father. That was during Vietnam. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he wasn't in favor of his little girl going off and doing a movie.
No, not at all, because he had waited, all these years to have a little girl. He had all these boys. His first wife, Lottie, gave him 3 boys. And then she died of a tooth infection because that was before the days of antibiotic. So when World War II came around, Daddy was given 2 of the bases in England to take care of. And he went over there, and the acting colonel said he was going stateside, and he goes, I haven't had time to look for a driver for you. Just take my my driver, Mary. She's very good under fire. She knows everybody. She can get you into anywhere you need to go. So we did. And when the girl came back, it was like, too bad, so sad. I've already put a ring on a finger. So.
That's great.
Yeah. Great. So then they came stateside after the war. They were married in England and came stateside and had my brother Tom and myself. So.
Wow. And so to get swept up into being in a major movie, were you a movie fan?
Not at all. Didn't go to the movies, didn't know anything about movies. You have to take yourself back into my time period where we had a television screen about the size of this computer that sat on the kitchen table. And most of the time it was just static fuzz, except for a few hours where you might get some news and weather, that was about it. And then, as it developed later on, then it was different. But we didn't go. I mean, my mom sure went to the movies. She knew all about that stuff. She loved that stuff. I mean, she was a thespian through and through. But for me, I was just a little kid. I mean, I was only 9 at the time, I think.
So when you learn about what the role of Scout entails, could you relate on a certain level? Because Scout was a small town girl in the same way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was. We had our own Calpurnia. We had dinner. We sat dinner every night at the dining room, and it was very much the same. You have to understand that in Birmingham, Alabama, it had not changed much. The 2 little old ladies across the street, the sisters, were still wearing dresses from the 1930s, as was Dr. Smith's wife, who lived next door. And being that my father was the age that he was, I was raised in a very Victorian manner. And so it was very much, but growing up in a house full of boys, because my brothers had boys from Daddy's first marriage. And I grew up with my nephews. Well, if you wanted to play with the boys, you had to be able to go out and you had to, play in the woods and build forts and go hunting and doing all that stuff. And Daddy was a big fisherman, so we would always go down to Gulf Shores and go fishing. And so I grew up very much a tomboy, still am.
Did you have a sense at the time of the scope of To Kill a Mockingbird? I mean, the book had already existed. So as a child, were you aware that this could be something that would be huge?
Heavens, no. I had not read the book, was not familiar with the book. At that time, was not a reader. I had no consciousness of any of that sort of thing because we didn't even get complete scripts. I was just given what I needed to learn, and that was about it. I had no idea of the full story until I saw the film.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And then I was totally blown away and was in tears, as were the rest of my classmates. So it was interesting. But as time has gone on, it has become my pivot point in life. I'm constantly getting asked about it. I go to high schools, colleges, universities to talk about the film and the book. And it's so important because it's even more important at this point in time in our lives. I think Mockingbird speaks directly to what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Going back though to when you first headed to Hollywood, was most of it shot on the Universal backlot?
Yes, it was all shot on the Universal
Okay.
backlot. And we had the luxury of having Horton Foote being part of that time period, and they had sent photographers to Alabama to photograph. They took thousands and thousands of photographs down in Alabama, so that when the set was built, they were lucky enough to find a group of houses that were being torn down to make way for, well, there was the baseball stadium that was going in. There was also the freeway, I think, was going in at that time. And those houses were purchased by the studio and then moved there. And then that was designed, and it was all set up. And I think it felt so comfortable. It felt so natural and real. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you watch that movie and just watching it again, there's such an authenticity to it. It doesn't feel Hollywood at all.
No. And Hollywood didn't want this film. They didn't understand it. They didn't know, they didn't see the relevance of it. Bob Mulligan and Alan Pakula took this book everywhere trying to get one of the studios to sign on to it. And they wouldn't. And it wasn't until they sent the book over to Atticus and he read it. And then he said he couldn't wait for 8 o'clock the next morning so that he could call them and say, if you want me, I'm your boy. And
wow.
Then he went into the studio and he put his money where his mouth was. He's like, if you guys want in on this, you better come on, because we're doing this with or without you. And when Gregory Peck walks in the door and says, this is what we're doing, the studio goes, oh yeah, wait, maybe we ought to jump in on this, let's rethink this.
Well, I love that you just called him Atticus too, and we've read and heard that that's how you referred to him even after the film, right? Through the rest of his life.
Yeah, because for me that was who he was, and my father couldn't be there for me. And the Pecks were dear enough to invite me over to their house on the weekends. And I played with Anthony and Cecilia, and we became a family. I mean, we became very close. And because of our relationship, I couldn't, it was too formal to call him Mr. Peck. And I certainly wasn't going to call him Greg. I mean, come on. So it was only natural. He became Atticus and I became Scout, and that's the way it stayed.
And you kept up with him the rest of his life too?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
I was up at the house just a few months before he passed away. And whenever I go to Los Angeles, I usually stay with Cecilia and her husband. So
that's great. That's great. And you were able to also share some wonderful scenes with several co-stars of your age. How was that experience filming with, one or two other kids on the lot?
Yeah, John Magna was absolute dear. He was so wonderful. And Philip Alford, who played Jim, again, we got along like brothers and sisters. I mean, it was like oil and water with Philip and I. And Philip was nothing better than a good fight, and he's so smart, he's so sharp, and it just he said we used to have knockdown, drag out fights. I don't remember that, but I remember having a hard time because, I mean, who else was I going to play with? I mean, here's this little kid, you know, and we got these other two kids, and I'm used to playing with boys, and they just weren't having it, just not having it.
Do you have a favorite scene that you filmed?
I think the favorite scene would have to be the bedroom scene where I'm reading to Atticus, because that was a dream I'd always had, that my daddy would come and put me to bed and read to me. But because of the social structure of the day, it wasn't going to happen. I mean, Beatty or Frankie put me to bed, and that was our housekeeper and our major domo, Mrs. Frankie McCall, and Mrs. Beatty Harris was assigned to me when I came along. It was just such a warm, loving moment. I really, really enjoyed it. And he did also. I mean, I think that was his favorite scene as well.
Well, and there's so many, important, dramatic themes going on in the movie, but the whole heart of that movie is the Atticus Scout relationship. And I mean, it's so beautifully captured throughout the whole film.
I think he's such a great role model. And the thing that made it so wonderful is that what you see in the film is what we got at home. I mean, he was funny. He loved to make people laugh. And I was a very serious little kid. I still tend to be kind of a serious adult, but it was because my mom and my dad were both older, and I grew up around older siblings and older people, all my parents' friends and everything. So I never really, once I left for California, I never really learned how to be a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So what was your relationship like with the other adults on the set, like Robert Mulligan, the director, who had to direct you, never having done anything? Was that a good working relationship?
Absolutely. He was one of the best directors they ever had. And it's a shame, really, that there had to be bad blood between the studio and him. I don't know what it was all about. I don't understand exactly what happened. But for me, he's the best director I ever had, bottom line, because he didn't talk down to us. He would squat down in front of us and give us the outline of what we were going to do, like the camera's going to be here. I need you to move from point A to point B. And, just a simple outline. He would let us do our thing. And if he needed to tweak it, he would tweak it. And he took his time with us. He was I never heard a harsh word on that set. I never heard any arguments. I never felt at all uncomfortable in any form or fashion. It was beautiful. It was absolutely great. I think everybody was really focused on doing the very best job that they could do and making this, because I think they all realized the importance of this film at that time.
Well, and that leads me to another question that I had. One of the major themes in the book and the movie is how the world looks different through children's eyes versus the eyes of adults. Yes. Has your view of the film, I mean, what were you mentioned before, the first time you saw it was watching with your classmates. What was your reaction then? And then have you viewed the film lately, and what's your reaction to it now?
Yes, because the importance over the years has grown. And we have so many issues that are so important to today. We have Mrs. Dubose, where you have a morphine addicted doctor prescribed medication. I mean, this is a major subject for today with
Absolutely.
opioid. We have mental illness where Boo Radley is shut up inside of his parents' home because that's what they did back then. I mean, even still today, you'll see it in places. You have the very, very poor that we have to deal with, that back in those days, there wasn't a whole lot available to them. When you have a collapse of an economy, if there's no money to buy seed, then the farmers can't plant, they can't grow things. That's something that we're dealing with today. These are all really family issues, the critical importance of a strong father figure in the home that is morally based and healthy. That's critical. And the joy of my life was that I had my daddy, plus I had Atticus, plus I had Brock Peters, who was an incredible human being, who played Tom Robinson. And I tell people all the time, I had reverse Oreo daddies because I had my dad, Gregory Peck, and there's Brock,
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to go over to be able to go over to Brock and Dee Dee's house. It was magical. It was absolutely wonderful. They were incredibly into music. If Brock and Dee Dee were having a party, people would come from Chicago, New Orleans. I mean, they were really into jazz, and some of the jazz greats would show up at their house. And they had this incredible living room where it was up on a hill where you could look out of the plate glass window and look out over the city. It was just magical. And to sit on the floor as a kid and be exposed to all of that, it was beautiful. It really was pretty. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned Brock Peters, and it always strikes me every time I watch it how for not having as much screen time as he does, he leaves such a lasting impression in that whole movie. And especially his scenes in the courtroom. And were you? I mean, we know that Scout is up in the gallery during that. Were you up there watching all this unfold while they were shooting?
No, because back in those days, it was deemed inappropriate for children and females to be exposed to certain language and that.
Okay.
I don't think that's a bad idea even today. I wish our children weren't exposed to as much as they are. I think they are exposed to way too much. So I was not allowed to be there. So you'll see people on the floor, but up in the gallery, that was shot later and separately. But my mother was present, and it brought her to tears. And the first time Brock went through it, he was so prepped that when he started, Bob Mulligan was up on the boom camera looking down to get that shot. And he didn't have the cameras running at the time. And Mother said, he starts doing this, start the camera rolling, get it going, So the rehearsal turned into the master shot.
Wow.
Which, when it was done, everybody on the floor stood up, and my mom was just like in total applause and tears and everything. Everybody was. It was just amazing.
Yes. That whole sequence, and then with Atticus's summation, and then of course that wonderful scene where the entire gallery stands up for him as he's leaving. It's still 60 years later, it still has the same effect it did in 1962.
Sure. And when we did it in Los Angeles, when Atticus was getting, I believe it was the AFI award, they had invited myself, and I took my daughter, and I told Chrissy, I said, I want you to go out front and I want you to bring me a stack of napkins. I don't mean a little stack, I mean a big stack of napkins. And she's like, Mom, what do you want with all the napkins? I said, never mind, just go get the napkins. So she went, she brought them. Because I was sitting next to Brock and the Pecks were back behind me, and I'm going, oh my goodness, this is going to be tight. And when that scene comes up for Brock, we started crying, and I don't think any of us stopped crying until after the courtroom scene was over. It's so emotional even today. I get really emotional just talking about it. So
you went through every one of those napkins, I'm sure, then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I looked over at Brock and I just couldn't believe it. I was so, and it made me so happy to see, and you could hear people sniffs all through the audience as people were in tears. I think a lot of ladies left that theater with no makeup on, which thrilled me no end.
I mean, in a movie filled with so many great performers and performances, I want to make sure that we ask about one of our favorite performers, Robert Duvall. I mean,
yes.
Did you what was your experience like with him? Did you keep in touch with him after the film as well?
Unfortunately not by my choice. Bob is very busy. He lives near me. He's got a farm like I do. We only had, I think, one day of shooting together, and that was it. So I didn't really realize, well, this is one of the other points. This goes back to Bob Mulligan. Okay. Bob would not let us see anyone out of character and out of costume until after we were done shooting with them completely. Once he was done, that was it. So I was leaving the soundstage to go to the schoolroom because we had school. So we had a trailer out back where Mrs. Grokey, my teacher, would be. So I was leaving, and here's this guy sitting on a pile of pallets with two little chippies there. And he says, aren't you going to say goodbye to Boo? Or aren't you going to say hey to Boo? That was what he said. And I looked at him. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who the heck it was. Right? I didn't recognize him.
That makes total sense, though. First of all, keeping the characters away from each other, because those characters don't meet in the story. So, there was Mulligan was trying to create this authenticity, and I think that does come across.
Exactly. He did the same thing with. Remember the scene where Boo's daddy comes around and he's cementing up the hole?
The knot hole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Bob has us there and we're concentrating on these dolls. We're looking at them. And here comes this guy around. And when he whacked that trowel onto that board, both of us just about jumped out of our skin. And it was perfect, because he saved that moment. And for directors, that's to have that sense of how to do that. That's really important. And he did that over and over again with the film. It was just really, when we did the scene with the dog, I was so worried about the dog. I mean, I was really, I was afraid that they were going to shoot it or something, and they assured me that nothing was going to happen, that it would be fine. But when I saw that dog go down, I went hysterical. I was ready to let down the road, to go see what was going on. And they were like, no, come over and pet him and see, The dog was fine and he got his treats and everything was good. The guy wiped out his mouth, So it was brilliant directing, and he was such a love. I mean, he was very loving and kind.
How involved was Harper Lee in the film? Did you get to know Harper Lee at all?
I did. She came, I didn't know her for long because she was supposed to come and spend 2 or 3 weeks with us. I think she spent 2 or 3 days with us and saw that everything was going fine. And then she was like, I'm out of here,
Wow.
She's in New York. So I didn't see her again until we did some press together afterwards. And then, unfortunately, I believed all the nonsense that the press was putting out about her not wanting to, be with people and not, being a very private person and everything. And so I was going down to Monroeville to see the play because they put the play on every year down in Monroeville. And I would go down and meet with the cast and everything. And then one day I drove over to her house and I saw a car there from Tennessee and I thought, she's got company. I'm not going to do this. So I left and I went back. And it wasn't until a couple of years later and her minister was going over to visit with her. And by this time she was in the nursing home. And she said, I'm going over to visit Miss Nell. Would you like to come? And I said, yeah, I would. So Reverend Butts took me over to the place and I met with her and I told her, I said, I've heard that you were a very private person and that's why I haven't come to visit. And I'm sorry. She goes, young lady, don't you ever come by here that you don't come say hey to me. I'm like, yes, ma'am. Okay. So I would go, when I would go down to Monroeville, I would stop in and visit her. But the last time I went down, I wasn't able to go see her. So, and she passed away shortly thereafter. So.
You were talking about the sort of aftermath of the movie a little bit, and you were nominated for an Oscar for this film. What was, for someone who wasn't a movie fan when you began, what was the whole Oscar experience like for you?
I had no idea what was going on. Through that point, I had been given an assigned seat. Okay, they sat me down, but they didn't tell me that this is an assigned seat and you have to stay here. So I'm sitting there, and this family comes up and it says, "Excuse me, dear, but we have one extra person and we have a seat right back here. Would you mind trading places with us?" And I'm like, being the little Southern lady that I was, sure, no problem. I moved, and I'm sure the director was like going nuts because by then everything was started, right?
Yeah, so where is she? We'll get a camera on her.
So if you look at any of the footage from that time period, you won't see me because I'm not where I was supposed to be.
That's great. Well, some more recent history. You were invited to the White House in 2012 for a viewing of the film. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Oh, it was funny. It was amazing. Barack Obama is like one of my major heroes. And I got I was actually one day headed into the dollar store of all places. My phone rings. And my friend says, Bob Ghazali, who is head of the AF, or was head of the AFI, said, I've got something coming up and I wondered if you would like to go. And I go, well, what is it? how would you like to go to the White House? And I'm like, what? Yes, we're going to be showing the film for Barack, and we wondered if you would like to come. And I said, is the Pope Catholic? Are you? Of course I want to come. So went to DC, and Bob had said, okay, all you got to do is just cut across from the hotel, and you're right there at the White House, right? So I go over there and I go to the guard, and the guard says, oh no, it's not this gate. You have to go down and down around there. And I'm like, okay. So I start to jog down. Oh no, it's not at this gate. Well, then this other person who is also one of the big wigs at AFI, she comes and she goes, oh my God, we're going to be late. So here we are in heels, running around the White House. We had to go all the way around the White House to get to the gate so naturally we get there, and I'm like, boom, I look like a girl. I was soaking, dripping wet. And of course, there's no time to get anything fixed. So I just thought, well, I'll just have to, this is it. I'll just have to go as I am. So they put us in, I forget which room it was. It's the one with all the murals on the wall where they hold people. So we're sitting in there, and so there's the Pecks, they're all over there. And so I thought, well, I'll just kind of hang back, and if they want me to come over there and join them, then that'll be fine. So then when they go around to have their picture taken, I lifted up my phone to take a photograph, and this hand comes and takes my phone and says, this will be returned to you after you are done. It was a Secret Service person. I broke the golden rule, right? Nobody told me I couldn't take a picture. Oh God. So then we went in, we watched the film and everything, and it was an interesting experience. It was just really amazing, and I can't thank Bob Gazzali enough for the opportunity to be there and to meet my hero. And Barack is just, I think, one of the most incredible people. I wish we had had time to talk, but sure. It was, how tight the schedule is for the president. They don't certainly give him much time at all.
Definitely. Well, you retired from acting just a few years after Mockingbird in 1966. Is that a decision that you're pleased with the way that your life's turned out?
I think so, because it allowed me to go and have a normal life. Okay. Mm-hmm. I went to school, wanted to study animal science, or not animal science. I ended up studying animal science. I wanted to be a large animal veterinarian, but they wouldn't let me into vet school because I was a female back then. They said, I went to Auburn University to see about getting into vet school. My horse came down with navicular disease, so I took him over there to donate him so they could study it. And so I thought, well, as long as I'm here, I better go talk to the dean and see what I have to do to get into vet school. And he goes, number one, you're a female. You women can come in here and take all my best students. And number two, your grades aren't good enough. Good day, young lady. So knew that wasn't possible. So when I got to university out in Arizona, I thought, well, I'll go into the animal science department and then transfer my major. Oh no, you can't do that, because if you are an Aggie, they won't talk to you at the vet school. You're like beneath them. Never made it to vet school. Enjoyed animal science and have used it because I always wanted a farm, and now we have a farm. And we've had all kinds of animals through the years, so it's been great. But I met my husband, the man who's my husband, when I was a senior in high school.
Wow.
And so now we're still together. It's amazing.
It's
After
great,
all
yeah.
these years. Yeah.
Mary, you mentioned earlier that this film is so relevant still today, and you've been just an incredible ambassador for this film, which I guess ties along with that last question. This film has afforded you a lot of opportunities to continue to promote it and go out there and discuss it. And so yeah, we really appreciate your time, because I'm sure you get asked a lot of these questions over and over. But is there anything else that you want to tell people about this film, about you, why it's important to you?
Well, I think this book is the most read book in the world.
More than the Bible.
It's more than the Bible, exactly. And if people read this book, I think it will speak to them in many different ways through their life. And it changes. The beauty of the book is that, well, and the film too, every time you read the book, you pick up on something that you didn't before.
Yes.
Your environment that you live in as you live changes. And this book can act as a moral jumping ground. It really helps you to answer a lot of things about yourself and the people you live around and how you want to conduct yourself in your life. It's been a great help to me with raising my kids. And I think it can do that for everyone. I would wish that more people would read the book. When I go to speaking engagements, a lot of times, if it's not like a school, if it's, a women's group or library or, whatever, that's outside of an educational setting, I look out usually to a sea of white faces, which disappoints me. I would love to see this book read and understood by more African-American families. The friends that I have that are African-American that have read the book and seen the film, they love it. And they totally get what it's trying to say. And the messages are as important today as they were then, if not more so. Today, I think it's more important that this book and this film and now the play are viewed as a learning tool. It's the best learning tool I have in my pocket.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, we can't thank you enough for spending a little bit of time with us and giving us your incredible memories of this great film. And it's just been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you so much for your interest. I really appreciate it. And stay well. Keep the messages about film going. We need all the help we can get.
We will do our part. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
You
nice
too.
to meet you both.
Once again, we are so appreciative of Mary Badham's time and her willingness to speak to us, and just a wonderful, enthusiastic person, and just so great to hear her recollections.
It was. I mean, to be able to speak to somebody that was actually there was just a true treat. You mentioned it in the opening, we don't get that a whole lot. So
No.
getting firsthand stories about this film filmed, in the early 60s. And it was just, I stood there with my eyes wide open, just wanting her to keep going on all these tales.
Yeah. And when you and I are recording this, it won't be when our audience hears this, but we're recording this on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so I can't think of a more appropriate time to talk about a movie with these kind of themes. And the the theme that always gets me about To Kill a Mockingbird is it's for me it's about empathy, and it's that great line of Atticus Finch: "You never really know someone until you get in their shoes and walk around in them."
Yeah.
And beautifully said by the wonderful Gregory Peck, and just totally deserved the Oscar that he got for this film. It's one of the landmark performances, but it's a wonderful cast of just wonderful character actors. Peck is really the main star of this film, but then to have all these wonderful character actors, and you feel like you're in a lived-in Southern community.
Yeah, and they all feel well. We really do need to point out that is because the novel does such a great job of painting the picture. The Harper Lee novel has been described as cinematic in how it puts the town and the characters and the situations all together. But then it's still a wonderful script, like you said, acted up and down the billing by wonderful actors, some of them without very much experience too, as we just found out.
Yeah, and I can't think of another movie, and we mentioned it in the interview, that really exposes what a childlike view of the world is. Those scenes when Jim and Dill and Scout are, trying to sneak into the Radley house at night. I mean, it's like a haunted house movie almost, and you feel the tense moments that a child would feel, and just the wonders that the imagination can do.
Yeah, absolutely. There, as a kid, it probably would have been pretty scary. If I had seen this movie, I will state this, that I was fortunate enough, as a senior in high school to be cast as Atticus Finch in my school play production of To Kill a Mockingbird, which was the first time that I saw this movie. And I hadn't seen it much since, go back and watch scenes every now and then, but I hadn't sat down and watched it beginning to end. And you're right, the tension that's in this movie, not only for the kids, but for the adults in those courtroom scenes, in the scenes outside the jail. It's a really well done, really well paced movie as well.
Oh yeah, it totally, it feels, even though it takes place in the 1930s South, and it does not feel dated when I watch it, because I mean, it was a period piece when they made it in the 60s, but with you think 1962, this was a year before the March on Washington, so we're very much in the civil rights era when this movie comes out. So it was very timely when it came out, and Mary mentioned it, Universal was really one of the only studios that was willing to take a gamble on it.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's one of those great hallmarks of American cinema, and it's one of the most inspiring feel-good movies, too. It's for such a dark movie, it leaves you feeling a little bit of hope at the end. The scene that got me this time, though, was Heck Tate's monologue at the end, after they're trying to figure out who killed Bob Ewell, and it becomes evidence that it was Boo that did it, and Heck Tate decides to just let, as he mentions, let the dead bury the dead and everything. And it's such a powerful moment on screen, because you go through all of this racial tension with the Tom Robinson case, and then you have this little bit of maybe humanity is good after all with the whole Boo Radley finale.
Yeah. Which I think people really remember this film for the other parts, the trial of an African American man, and the accusations by the poor white family. But you really, and Mary brought this up in her interview, this movie really touches on so many other themes, including how we treat everyone who is marginalized in one way or another, but including people with mental health issues. And again, probably why this movie still feels as fresh as it does is because we're still, as a society, grappling with these issues. You wish they were all as solvable as the police officer turning the other way and it just kind of magically disappears. But that does button up this movie and give it that note of hope that you really need at the end of the story.
Yeah. And I'm just as we always do, I'm looking here at just some of the the awards and accolades that this movie has received. And first of all, looking at it was a budget of only $2 million and it made 13.1 at the box office. So this movie, in a very heated time in American history, was a pretty big box office hit.
Well, and we always sort of measure multiples of budget as a key indicator of success, and 2 or 3 times would have been great in the early 60s.
Yeah.
So to have it go, a much higher multiple than that, this was a huge hit at the time for the studio.
Definitely. And then the movie was nominated for 8 Oscars. We mentioned that Mary was nominated for 1 for Best Supporting Actress. It was nominated for its score, for its cinematography, for Best Director for Robert Mulligan, and for Best Picture. It ended up winning 3. It won for its art direction. Horton Foote won for the screenplay, and certainly Gregory Peck won for Best Actor. This movie comes out the same year as Lawrence of Arabia, so it's got some pretty big competition. But definitely for Peck to have won Best Actor though that year, that shows you the power that this movie has, and it definitely stayed that way. It was added to the National Film Registry in 1995 by the Library of Congress, and then on the American Film Institute list in 1998. It was number 34 on the list. And then actually on the 10th anniversary edition in 2007, it went up to 25. And then on the, the greatest, most inspiring movies of all time, it was number 2. On the top 10 courtroom dramas of all time, it was number 1. It was number 17 on the greatest film scores of all time. And really interesting, and I remember this made headlines when it happened, Atticus Finch was named the number 1 movie hero in film history, and I think incredibly appropriate. I think it just confused some people because they were advertising their heroes and villains list as more fantastical type stuff, but I can't think of a better movie hero than Atticus Finch.
And I think that this transcended the film industry, and there have been law schools that have named him as sort of he's held up as sort of the example of what a moral attorney should look like, and I believe there's statues erected to Atticus Finch. You look at all of that, and the guy lost.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one of the lines from the book and the movie that really ring true with me. He's when Atticus is telling Jem, having courage is going into the fight knowing you're already licked and going into the fight anyway. I mean, that's going to be a piece of wisdom that stands the test of time. So this movie, if we had another AFI list today, I'd be real curious to see. It seems like it's almost more relevant now with the issues that have been going on in the world. I would love to see where it would land on the AFI's list today.
Yeah, it's a timeless movie, and if you haven't seen it in a while, I would urge you to go and watch it. It's a movie I know a lot of people feel like, oh, I know that movie. I've seen it many, many times, but it's a movie that still speaks to you. And I think depending on the age you are, I think it can take on even more meaning every time you see it, and you find new things like when Mary was talking to us about, the way it discusses, mental health and things like, that's something I don't readily think about when I think of the movie, but next time when I watch it, I'm going to view it through that lens.
Sure. And, she mentioned when you destroy an economy of a people, I mean, COVID did that. It did that to the world. So what are the right things to do when that happens? And so it speaks to our times very much. And I agree. This is one that people should go rewatch more regularly.
Yeah. So Eric, before we sign off here, any final thoughts on the interview or To Kill a Mockingbird altogether?
I'd like to thank Mary again. I mean, our little podcast, getting an Academy Award nominated actress to come on and talk about her experiences on a film blows my mind. We really appreciate it. We hope that she had a good time speaking about this film. She considers herself an ambassador of it. It's kind of our mission. We want people to go watch this film and other classic films, take the good things from it. So go do that for her to make sure that her work is fulfilled.
Yeah, it's something we've been doing for 100 episodes, and hopefully we'll do 100 more. And
Absolutely.
We've certainly got the films in our, we've certainly got a list of films to get through. So yeah, definitely, especially this time now, I would really urge you to watch To Kill a Mockingbird again. But that wraps up our 100th episode, and I'm really glad that our listeners have joined us, and I'm glad that we've picked up more listeners as the year has gone along, and I hope we continue to, because it's, as you mentioned, Eric, it's important to keep talking about these movies, important to keep them alive and relevant, because I read a quote, and I think it was Lauren Bacall that said it: there's no such thing as old movies, just movies you haven't seen. So, which is a great quote. And so I think that our podcast kind of is introducing new movies to people that maybe they haven't seen.
Yeah, new to them.
So so this has just been great. We did a lot of our thank yous on our year-end podcast, so we won't go into all that. But once again, just thank you to Brett Rutherford, who does all the editing for us. We couldn't do this without him. And just to all of the hosts that join us through the years. We've got some great stuff coming down the pike. We've mentioned it on other episodes. We have a great episode on Cool Hand Luke coming out next week with a friend of mine, Noah Henry, and it's a great discussion.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I'm looking forward to, like you said, 100 more.
Yeah. So here's to the next 100 for Front Row Classics. As always, email us, classicsfrn@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Suggest a movie, suggest a topic we can discuss, anything. We love hearing from you all. Find us on Instagram at classicsfrnpod. Find us on Twitter at FRN Classics, or join our Facebook group, Front Row Classics Podcast. Any way to get a hold of us. This has been great. I'm looking forward to many more movie discussions. So for Front Row Classics, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Eric.
And we will see you in the front row.